Basically, how we're going to do it is I'm going to give everybody here to give a chance to just kind of introduce yourself, your general political philosophy, and I'll give you 1 minute each, and then we're going to move to opening statements, which will be 2 minutes each on the topic at hand. I'll tell you that straight after the intros. So if each of you would like to go, Double Shine, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Double Shine. I do politics and gaming, and I broadly identify as a soc dem. Yeah, I don't really know what else.
And then if FL Scott wants to go, Fabian?
Yeah, so I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. We are a anarcho-capitalist duo stream. We do some philosophy readings from time to time. We do some Discord community nights. Mostly we do news reactions, and lately I've been on just a ton of panels. You can catch me on Prime K's or Hippy Dippy or stuff like that kind of all the time. So just check us out. Yeah.
Okay, over to Dan.
How you doing? I'm Dan. I'm a streamer, I'm a writer. I'm the editor of No Majesty. It's an online arts and culture magazine. And yeah, I've been streaming for about half a year. I'm a lefty on pretty much every subject, and that's me.
And a fellow Britbong. And finally, Lucas.
My name is Lucas. I go by Robin the State on Twitch. You can find me there. I am an anarcho-capitalist too. I'm streaming video games or just talking about news and politics. I'm originally from Cuba too.
Nice. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'll give you the topic, which is going to be on the Omnichrome, as I am rebranding. It sounds like a tech company in my mind, so I'm rebranding it to Omnichrome. The Omnichrome variant of COVID-19 slash COVID 2021, the new version. Given the rise of the number of cases within both the UK and the US, do we believe that the government should step in and put in relevant restrictions such as face masks, social distancing measures to reduce these cases, or should we leave it over to an individual level? And whatever which way you're going to lean, just give me a good explanation as to where your position is. I'm going to give you 2 minutes for opening statements. We'll go around the same order, so Double Shine if you want to give your thoughts first.
Sure. I'll be largely focusing on the United States. That's just because where I'm from. Public health is absolutely a chief responsibility of the government, shown both in the active policymaking of not only the Biden administration, but previous administrations as well, in handling the COVID virus, and the overwhelming concern of American people towards both healthcare and specifically the coronavirus outbreak. It's lagging only behind the economy in terms of issues that voters care about. We have decades of precedent in the United States highlighting the government's job in maintaining good health care and the general public health of the people. While the information surrounding the Omicron variant is still premature, we should know more about its effects in the next 2 weeks, and the government should act accordingly to prevent the spread. Early data seems to suggest the Omicron won't lead to massive spikes, but reminds us that new variants, predominantly developed in the unvaccinated population, will continue to threaten our daily life until they are handled. The Biden administration has set plans forward to address the COVID pandemic, along with any new variants, with policies geared towards vaccinating the population to diminish the risk of hospitalization and death, as well as to curb new variants from developing, promoting booster shots as a method of ongoing defense from the vaccine, and general health guidelines that we've encouraged since the start of the pandemic, such as wearing masks, social distancing, and limiting travel.
Great, and over to Fabian.
Did you type that out? That was amazing. It was so concise.
did,
I have to
yeah.
know. That was great. I love it when people prepare for these. Yeah, so I would say my argument hinges on two things. Number one, looking at GSED right now, South Africa a few days ago, 144 cases. 2 days ago. Now we're at 172. Ghana's got 33. Botswana, 19. UK went in 2 days from 4 known cases to 18 cases, right? On and on and on. The US has its first case. We know that that these lockdowns aren't going to do anything other than potentially slow the spread, right? So I don't think anyone that's looking at the information is saying, oh, we're going to be able to get a handle on this. We're going to stop it, right? The argument is it okay to restrict liberty, to restrict freedom, to use authoritarian state measures to stop people from being able to live their lives freely, and take away those freedoms that they have, as well as have some type of negative impact on the economy, to slow the spread, to allow hospitals to be able to prepare for a new variant? And the answer is simply no. You've had 2 years to prepare, right? The data doesn't seem to suggest that we're going to get some massive surge and spike. The best thing that we can do to deal with this is allow companies and businesses to react as they see fit and allow individuals to have their informed consent. Whether or not they want to take the vaccine should be completely up to them. And the idea that the state is pushing a potentially extremely dangerous vaccine that could lead to ADE, and we can get into that more when we look at the actual science. The fact that this vaccine is not a sterilizing vaccine, the ACE2 receptor problems, the problems with acquired immunity, the problems with the Omicron variant having phenotypical changes within the spike proteins, and the fact that we're still using SARS-CoV-2 alpha variant,
Go 20 more
long spike
seconds.
proteins, et cetera, all of these things. This idea that pushing vax mandates and pushing lockdown mandates is somehow good is absurd, because it's A, unethical and wrong, and B, ineffective.
Okay, great. And over to Dan.
Okay, so my position on this is relatively straightforward. I am pro-vaccine mandate, I am pro-mask mandate, and I am pro-lockdown. When it comes to new variants like the Omicron variant, we know that these occur because COVID is spreading throughout the population, having time to evolve, having time to change. The more that people are compromised by the virus, the more that people have less immunity to the virus, the more chance the virus has of adapting, changing, becoming more likely to spread faster, even if we're vaccinated. That's why we have things like booster shots. It's not a natural course of the pandemic. It's because we have some people that are unvaccinated and some people that are. We're already past the point of being able to ever really see COVID zero. I don't think that's a future that any of us can really expect to see. But what we can see is that from a data perspective, if we look at masks, we know that states in America, for instance, that implemented mask wearing mandates, these almost all had lower cases of COVID infections. From a philosophical perspective, if you want to kind of come at it that way, and I hear a lot of Americans when I talk to them about it come at this way. If you're concerned with freedom, if freedom is your primary concern, then you should want vaccine mandates as well. It's very difficult, and this is kind of a flippant point, to enjoy your freedoms when you're dead, on one hand. On the other hand, you've got freedom from something and you've got freedom to something, right? So you've got freedom to run about without a mask on your face. I would like freedom from death, preventable death. That's me.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm also taking the position that no, I am against the mandates. I don't think they were effective. Also, this idea that the virus came from with the most unvaccinated place. We don't know exactly where Omicron came from. If you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we do know that Africa has more cases of Omicron, but we don't know exactly where it came from. So that I think that's anti-science and pretty much just a lie. Also, yeah, I think we should leave this up to business owners and people's individual freedoms. If they want to go to businesses or places that don't have any restrictions, they should be allowed to do that. And if they don't want to, they should be allowed to stay in their house. I love how lefties always do this play on words when they do freedom from and freedom to. The reality is the liberty of somebody is just the right to act, and if you don't have the right to do something, that's your freedom being taken away from you. Yes, that's pretty much all I have to say about that.
Okay, great. So going into free discussion, we'll probably give you about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. Please don't say anything that is TOS. I mean, that should be obvious. And know that we're on Twitch, so anything to do with vaccines is a bit of a touchy subject, so just be careful with what you say, because we're all streaming as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, if I have, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
Yeah? Sorry, do you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just saying if you got to kick me at some point because I'm gonna talk about the science of why the vaccine is dangerous and not safe and effective, like I understand, but I'm just gonna be speaking about the actual science. Well cited published articles, but this is not a safe or effective vaccine.
Yeah, I'll kind of I know TOS like really really well, so if you kind of step on line, maybe I'm like, all right, hey, if you can like, I'll kind of just like give you a heads up, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm just saying if you, I mean like it's not a matter of like me being worried about TOS in that situation.
Right.
If you feel like you need to kick me, just kick me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Consider
understand.
it a
Yeah,
win.
yeah. As long as you don't break TOS, then it's fine. But I'm sure you'll be fine. I've been around when you've debated this before, so it should be fine.
Okay, great.
Perhaps if we have a
So
rule that we stick to studies, there won't be any need for it, I don't think.
yeah,
Right.
that's fair. Right, we'll go into open discussion now then. I'll step in if it gets too spicy, but hopefully you can be big boys and not argue too violently. Off you go.
Yeah, I mean, I
What are you talking about? Of course, we're not going to be violent. We believe in the non-aggression principle.
Principle, yeah.
yeah, so I'd absolutely love to talk about the vaccine itself because, from the perspective that the vaccine doesn't do anything and is dangerous, which is what
We
I'm
never said-
sure you guys believe.
Wait,
No,
Then
We
I
never said
understand.
that.
I understand why mandates. I'm pretty sure Fabian just said that the vaccine is dangerous. Am I wrong?
wait, we never. No, I'm saying that we never said that the vaccine didn't do anything.
Oh,
How are you on the
okay. I'll
safety
sorry.
aspect
I'll
of
make it worse. It does bad things. It's dangerous, right? So
Well, it does
I mean,
bad and good
I'd love to,
things.
yeah, I'd
Things
love
can
to talk
be
about.
dangerous and good.
Sure, I'd love to talk about the
Yeah,
vaccine.
see, this is
itself,
the
because
N
right
word.
now,
The nuance
right?
that we were talking about. Yeah, the N word.
Right. I haven't said that word, right? So okay, when we talk about the vaccine, I'm really curious what about the vaccine you think is not working, because overwhelmingly the statistics are showing that vaccinated people are not getting hospitalized. It's overwhelmingly unvaccinated people that are not just
Absolutely true.
hospitalized, but are that are dying as well. It's occurring in these populations way more than it's happening to the vaccinated people. It's not even like I mean the level is just it's orders of magnitude. So I'm just super curious what you think about the vaccine is not working, because all the statistics are showing otherwise.
Well, again, you keep straw manning me and saying that I'm saying that the vaccine doesn't work, right? It depends on what you mean by efficacious, right? So this isn't a sterilizing vaccine. Let's start there, right? I mean, I think everyone agrees that this isn't a sterilizing vaccine, right?
Yeah.
Like we can accept that there are breakthrough infections that are fairly common, right? That the vaccine was never really designed to be a sterilizing vaccine. Instead, it was designed for your body to produce antibodies to the spike proteins on the virus itself, right? It was never designed to it's not a live attenuated virus, right? So unlike natural acquired immunity, right? We'll use that because a lot of people say natural immunity, acquired immunity from an infection, right?
Just to be clear, the CDC uses natural immunity. So I mean, I know you don't like going off the CDC, but what you're saying with acquired immunity, that's what they call natural immunity. Just to be clear.
Yeah, I just say it because
I know
occasional
semantics. I'm just pointing it
person
out.
in my chat that gets mad at me, and I'm like, no,
Sure.
Every time we say natural immunity, she goes like, ah.
There's like one or two people that I have that get really mad at. So for example, when you have acquired immunity from an infection, right? You develop antibodies for the membrane, for the spike proteins, for the hemagglutinin extraase, for the envelope proteins, for the lipid biolayer membrane, and most importantly, the neocapsid proteins, right? The neocapsid proteins are really important here because Nature magazine, early in the pandemic, right, cited 512 times, showed that people that had SARS-CoV-1, right, or not SARS-CoV-1, but just SARS, that they had antibodies for the N proteins, right? So this is from 2003. They still have some level of acquired immunity. What we're seeing from Pfizer's own studies, for example, is even after 4 months, the transmission efficacy, right, is dropped down to 53%. That's why we need additional boosters in order to maintain a certain level of immunity against the virus. But the problem occurs as we understand that breakthrough infections can also have variants, right? There's no statistical significant difference between the viral load in the upper respiratory tract between a breakthrough infection and from those that are unvaccinated. Now, in the lower respiratory tract, there is, right? That's what does That's why you don't get as sick. That's why you're less likely to go to the hospital or to die from the virus, right? The problem is, right, is that you have this increased risk of ADE when you have all of these breakthrough infections, right? And so what ADE can do is, if we don't know what the vaccinated population or how they're going to react to the Omicron variant, but what we do know is that we have phenotypical changes in the spike proteins, right? And so when you have phenotypical changes in the spike proteins, they could do just the same thing as the original SARS-CoV virus, but if antibodies are attaching to those spike proteins and they're actually enabling entry into the ACE2 receptor cells of the tissue membrane because of this, right? Then you could get in a situation where you have AD. You could get in a situation where individuals that only have acquired immunity to spike proteins that have phenotypical changes, right, could actually be helping the antibody dependent enhancement. Antibody dependent enhancement is, you saw this in dengue virus, RSV, and the original measles vaccine. Basically, what happens is you get a vaccine, it's only to part of the cell. You get a variant with a different cellular structure. And what ends up happening is the vaccine gave you antibodies
go.
only to a small portion of the cell, the long spike proteins, right? And they'll attach to those long spike proteins and they'll actually facilitate the virus
It's weird
spreading
modeling.
in your body. So when you have breakthrough infections and you have this, what you have to understand is each new variant runs a potential risk of the vaccinated being the one that the new variant can kill, and not the unvaccinated or those who have had a previous infection. This is just one piece of the science. I'm just going to lay that out.
Right, yeah, and I just want to very clearly point out that all of this talk about ADE, it's all speculation. There's absolutely no evidence that has been shown to suggest otherwise. Again, ADE has happened in the past, like you mentioned, with something like RSV, where clinical trials were pulled because they did notice that, and then they actually put out an actual vaccine that does help. But again, that was pulled in clinical trials. Dengue fever did happen as well. However, in COVID virus, we have over 100 million people vaccinated. There's absolutely no evidence to suggest that there's any kind of antibody-dependent enhancement taking place. The only thing that I've seen so far is a study that was using molecular modeling. It didn't use any experimental data. It showed no effect on human cells or any animal cells at all.
And
we
just
do,
to add
we
to
do
that
have
point,
studies
the
showing it
ability
happening in
to
animal cells. By the
the
way,
need
phase
to
2 clinical trials.
the need to change vaccines and adapt vaccines depending on what we see in terms of infection and what we see in terms of COVID doesn't invalidate the need for vaccines.
Of course not. Of course not. What I'm talking about is, I'm not, look, I've said multiple times on my channel, if you're 55 and you have diabetes, like, get the fucking vaccine. Like,
Get the
talk to your
fucking
doctor, but
vaccine.
get the fucking vaccine, right? What I'm talking about is when you have all of these potential risks,
Have to be so
right? When you have
quiet.
all of these unknown variables, because we're still in phase 4 clinical trials, we don't know why. Like, we don't know the difference between racial differences in ACE2 receptor cells. We don't understand, why we're getting false positives on mammograms and prostate cancer checks. We don't understand why abortions, and I mean this as miscarriages, right? But the medical term abortions. We don't know why these are occurring. We don't know why certain latent viruses such as Bell's palsy or shingles are being activated by the spike proteins. And when we have research coming out of Sweden showing that it is, this is not peer reviewed yet. This is just coming out, right? But when we have research suggesting that the long spike proteins have the ability to enter the nucleus and actually stop your cellular structure from being able to repair itself, specifically with cancer-causing mutations, there's this idea that we're going to mandate all of this.
I am muted,
That the
yes.
state is going to say, no, everything's fine, everything's safe, trust the science, and then we're not actually going to talk about all the potential risks that are in the science, right? It's one narrative, and that narrative is, you better be scared, and we're going to take away your freedom and your liberty, and we're going to take away your informed consent. And so I think there is a lot of potential risks. I'm not saying that the vaccine is going to kill everybody. Obviously, this vaccine has killed, in America, somewhere between 10 and 30,000 people, but it's not like COVID hasn't killed way more than that, right? There are obviously risks with any vaccine as well, but this one seems to be far more dangerous and have far more potential issues. So you need informed consent.
So to that point then, you said that it was fear-mongering, this idea, you better get the vaccine, you better actually take it, and we're going to mandate that you take it. Is the fear-mongering based on what we know about COVID deaths and how we know it's entering the population and the deaths that we know that are occurring in different demographics? Is that
I want to
science a
shut
lot
up
more
after
valid?
this and give other people a
Is that
chance
not a
to
lot
talk.
more kind of valid in terms of fear mongering than
I mean,
everything that you've just
I
mentioned
mean,
to do with the vaccines?
we do know that both Republicans and Democrats in the United States think that COVID is far more dangerous than it actually is.
Yeah,
They're being
98%
polls
of
that
Democrats and
yeah
84% of Republicans
yeah
said that the hospitalization rate was far higher than it actually was, and 41% of Democrats said that they thought if you caught COVID that you had an over 50% chance of hospitalization, regardless of your
it's not true.
vaccination status.
That doesn't surprise me because I know that people always have a more sensational view of something in their head than what is actually happening in reality. We know this
Mhm.
in all kinds of fields of study. However,
Yeah, it's
what
yeah,
we
just
do know
but
about
this kind of
COVID is
plays
that
into
there
what
is
we're saying
far
that
more.
the this
Whatever
kind of plays
studies that we
into
do
what
in
we're
the
saying that there's
future,
a lot of fear mongering going around how dangerous the virus actually is, and when in reality it's far less dangerous than people actually think it is.
it may
listen,
be less
and
dangerous than people think it is, but compared to the vaccine, the dangers of COVID completely outweigh it. The
yeah, I mean,
amounts of
it's
deaths
really
that we've
interesting.
seen from the vaccines are in the low thousands, and that is still needs to be investigated. The only source that we have of COVID vaccination deaths, which are reported by the public, so this is yellow card. This is the thing that every single vaccine company has, where you can report side effects, you can report deaths. You
Yeah,
can do
yellow
this
card's
if
the
you're a
British system.
doctor.
Yeah.
You can do this if you're a doctor. You can do this if you are my nan that's just been on social media all her life and got all the information from Facebook. And they'll take it all as seriously. All the numbers take all of these people into effect. Your experts and your anoraks, right?
So
So we
there's
can't
two
rely on
issues with
that.
that
But
with the
even that
American
data,
system.
just to finish that point, just even that data, even if we were to take every single case that came in as fact and say, yep, I believe you, nan that only goes on Facebook. Yeah, I believe you, dude with a PhD. Even if we counted all of those as fact, that would be in the low thousands of
So
vaccine deaths.
America has VAERS,
Yo,
right?
thank you for
Which
the
is a little
follow,
bit,
Johnny.
which is a
Appreciate it.
little bit less open than yellow card, right? So the thing about VAERS that's really interesting is it is open to the public, and it does have some of those same issues. The problem is that VAERS requires documents that have ICD-10 coding in them, right? You guys use ICD-10 in Europe as well. And so with that being said, the likelihood of the average person being able to access that and being able to actually like meaningfully put in, fill out those reports, because I've had to do them before when I was in a vaccination clinic. It's an extreme pain in the ass, and if you don't know how to do that, it is an incredibly low likelihood, and any documents that are attached that don't have ICD-10 coding on them get thrown out. So ours is a little bit more accurate, but you're not wrong that they could be overreported because of political reasons and fear and things of that nature. But the overwhelming amount of scientific data and research suggests that VAERS very often underreports, and that it is incredibly rare that VAERS overreports in any capacity. As a matter of fact, until COVID, there was almost no speculation that it had ever been done, right? Because what ends up happening just as much is doctors are slammed with patients, and so they decide not to attribute it, and they don't fill out a VAERS report. Right. Because it's like, dude, if I've got tons of patients, I'm not going to sit down and fill out a 45-minute fucking VAERS report, right, to try and get all this information out there. And especially the politics can swing in the other direction, right, where people are like, trust the science, trust the vaccine. Doctors are just as susceptible to this as too. What we do know is that we have VAERS, and we also know that we have a lot of people showing up in morgues, dying of, ischemic heart failure of an unknown etiology, right? Now, so we can surmise that the numbers could be a little high, they could be a little low. We're not exactly sure, but as of the 19th of November in America, we have 19,249 reported deaths from the COVID vaccine.
Okay, so 19,000 deaths reported from the COVID vaccine. You've thrown in a point at the end there, which I feel like needs to be addressed, which is that if somebody shows up in a morgue with an unattributable cause of death, we can't count that as part of this argument. We just can't, right?
Absolutely.
It does.
100%.
It's like people falling in the shower could have COVID, right? It's almost unrelated. You
Yeah,
can
well,
kind of feel.
you
You
can
can
do the
kind of
math of
feel.
projected deaths and then look at like why we
It
have
has
an
to be math,
increased
though.
number,
Of
right?
course.
Like you can see that there's a few thousand, every few months where you're kind of going over of what should be occurring kind of situation. But again, you're absolutely right.
Could be
I
anything.
wouldn't attribute it to that per se. I would just say it's something to think about.
Yeah, act of God. You call it in America, I think. Until you know what it is, there's nothing. The only thing that I would say is that even if it's did you say 20,000?
19,249. So,
Yeah.
under 20, but around 20. Closer to
I mean-
19,000.
Okay, so I don't actually know how many COVID deaths you've had in America. I know that it's 5
Last I
million.
checked, it was like 790,000.
Okay, so I feel like it's almost like it's such a large number. I almost feel like I don't need a follow up to it. So like in a court, I would almost rest my case, even if
Right.
all of these things that you feel
there's
into.
what happens when you look at
How-
what I'm actually recommending. Under the age of under the age of 24, America has only had 2,200 COVID deaths. So people that are 24 or younger throughout the entirety of the pandemic, more people have died from aspirin overdoses than COVID. You are more
and-
likely to know someone in your age group, if you're 22, that died from an OD of aspirin than someone that actually died from COVID. So the idea that these people, for their own safety, should be taking a should be taking a vaccine with all of these unknown effects is like kind of absurd that the government should be mandating that, especially when you have
Okay.
breakthrough infections and stuff.
Okay,
Yeah, so two things I want to quickly talk about. So one, I mean, you say that it's less than aspirin overdose, which one, that doesn't actually
true.
mean anything. It's still a lot of people dying, right?
And it's
We can
always
absolutely
suicide,
say that.
almost always anyways. But yeah.
Yeah. So second, we can also the bigger problem and why it's so important to get people who are unvaccinated is because again, they can transmit it, right? And that's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we're getting as many people vaccinated as possible, specifically so that the ones who may actually have some like legitimate exemptions from it are protected by herd immunity. We've also seen again variants do develop in unvaccinated population. This is why it's so important and why everyone should care about unvaccinated people, because they are essentially walking petri dishes of bioterrorism. They're walking around and creating and
I'm
developing.
sorry, I triggered.
No,
Oh,
we can't.
I'm
No, we
sorry.
can't because there's
Just like
we can't
you
we
spread
can't
the
say it
virus
because
just
there's
as much.
absolutely no. We can't say because there's absolutely no evidence to suggest that there's any ADE occurring. And overwhelmingly, these new variants, such as the Delta, occurred. That started in India before they had any vaccinations going on.
Can you stop strawmanning what we're saying?
I'm not strawmanning you. I'm trying to get
We're
my
not talking
point.
about
and
ADE now. We're not. We'll talk because you're lying. I'm interrupting.
Okay.
you 'cause
Wait.
you're
I'm
lying.
sorry. Can you
Straight
tell
up
me
lying.
how is it
Are
developing
you gonna
in the
let me
vaccine?
speak?
No,
Are you
I'm
gonna
going to
let me
ask you a
speak?
question because you interrupted like the last minute of me speaking.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
I'm
gonna
gonna
say
let
something.
I'm gonna
You're
let
not
Lucas
letting me.
respond, and then Double Shine, you can respond back to him.
Yeah, my point was that we're just as like we have no data on whether the vaccine decreases the spread of the virus. We don't know that. In fact, I would say that you might be even spread it more because you're more likely to be asymptomatic. So you're more likely to take risk after you get COVID because you're asymptomatic.
If you're asymptomatic, you don't spread a virus as quickly.
You still spread it.
No, real quick.
If you're
No.
asymptomatic, you don't
There's
spread a
no
virus as quickly
statistically
because
significant difference in the viral load
Yeah.
of the upper respiratory tract
Okay,
between a
I
breakthrough
don't know what you-
infection and
Okay,
not.
just
What
to
that
clarify
means
what
is you're
asymptomatic
sneezing, you're
means.
coughing, you're literally just as likely to spread the virus if you have a breakthrough infection.
So just to explain what asymptomatic means, it means you have less symptoms or no symptoms in most classifications, right? So you're not coughing, you're not sneezing, okay?
You're still breathing.
If you
You're not
contract the virus,
quarantining.
people who contract the virus are more likely to have symptoms of coughing and of sneezing.
Yeah, and they're more likely to stay at home.
quarantine.
And people who are
Yeah, they're more likely
Right,
to
and
quarantine.
people who are, I may have misspoke there. People who are unvaccinated are more likely to contract the virus and develop symptoms. Therefore, they are more likely to spread the virus because that's how a virus works. If you contract it and you become sick, you cough more, you sneeze more, you spread more virus, and you're more likely to become sick.
That's not
That's
how it works.
that's
if you are
assuming
unvaccinated.
That's not scientific. You're engaging in.
We know that about every single disease throughout
you're being
history.
anti-science
You are
right now.
vaccinated. No, if you are vaccinated against something, you are more likely to not get sick from it.
Yes.
Right? If you don't get sick, you're less likely to be coughing and sneezing. So you're
But
less
this
likely
isn't a
to spread
sterilizing
the virus.
vaccine.
Yeah.
This isn't a sterilizing vaccine.
It's not, but
It's a vaccine
the
that
data does
reduces
show.
incidences of illness,
Yes.
which means
So-
less coughing and sneezing
Yes.
on average, which means
it
less
also-
spreading of
Yeah,
the virus.
see, this
because
is
This
the
that's
also
same
how the
means
virus
this
works.
also means
You're
this
engaging
also
in-
means
you're
that you're
engaging in
more likely.
anti-science.
It's
You're
not
missing the
anti-science
middle.
to say that less coughing and sneezing is less spreading of the virus.
right? But you're not engaging in the reality of the world, right? What we're
That's
saying,
the reality of the world, what I just
y-
said there.
though, yes, I, I will respond
Moderator
to
can't
this in a
leave. That's not
second,
allowed.
but Double Shine was supposed to speak after Lucas and respond.
Yeah,
And
go
I
ahead,
got
Double.
excited and jumped in, so I'm going to shut the fuck up and let Double Shine.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, yeah. So this is just absolutely false. I don't know why you guys are saying it's anti-science when this is shown again and again that the viral shedding period of where you are, uh, exhaling these like virus particles, it's not only less than people who are unvaccinated, but it's also a weakened version of the virus as well. So again, vaccinated people are absolutely transmitting it at a less rate. You can't deny this. This has just been proven over and over again in science.
I can. First of all, there's no such thing as a weakened version of the virus. That doesn't exist. That's just like made up stuff. I'm assuming you misspoke. Maybe what you meant to say is that they had less of a viral load because they have less of a viral load in the lower respiratory tract, right? Now, here's the thing. The most contagious that you are after the infection is day 2 to day 5, right? You begin to develop symptoms usually around day 2 or day 3, right? So most people, when they're sick, are asymptomatic at first, right? And that is when they're most likely to spread the virus. This is true for unvaccinated as well as vaccinated people, right? What we're saying, however, is from that day 3 to day 5, right? And it can be all the way up to day 9, in some cases, even day 10 for unvaccinated people. You are absolutely right that you cough more, you sneeze more, and that you carry the virus with you longer. And all of these things can make it more likely to transmit the virus to new people. And it's in your body longer, which means you can develop new variants for a longer period of time. All of that is true, and all of that is science. The reason I'm saying you're being unscientific is because you're omitting a lot of other conflating variables. And those other variables are the fact that breakthrough infections are not rare, they're common, right? Even after 4 months of Pfizer, which is the best, the creme de la creme, right? You are at a 53% difference between the unvaccinated, right? It is basically for every 2 vaccinated people and for every 2 unvaxxed person that gets sick, 1 vaccinated person gets sick, right? So
But you know what I would add to that, don't you? You know what the part
boosters, you would
of
add
that is?
boosters.
Boosters.
Yeah,
Boosters.
right. And then we can get into that later. My problem is if the Sweden study is true, right? Adding boosters over and over and over again could come with significant health risks that wouldn't occur from COVID. And all of the adverse effects that come from the vaccine could actually, at a certain point, become worse than the virus itself, right?
That's the
cure
speculative
could,
bit, yeah?
it is speculative. Absolutely. I'm just saying
Purely.
it's not purely speculative
Not
because
purely.
I'm basing it off
Purely
of,
in the sense that we haven't got any, it's not based on any actual research. It's
no,
not
I'm
based on
literally
any,
saying there
it's
is
not
research
based on lab,
showing.
From
it's not
Sweden.
based on
Yeah.
lab
I mean, we
studies,
can
it's
we can
based on
talk about the
speculation, right?
University of Marseille just came out and said that ADE is already occurring in fucking Delta variant. That there's partial ADE already occurring. We already have research coming out of France that is saying that partial ADE is already occurring. This came out in August and then didn't get published until was it New England? Sorry, I'd have to look at the study again. But I can send that to you at some point if you want. But so no, getting back to what I'm saying is what we're trying to say is that if you are asymptomatic from day 3 to day 5, there's a longer period of time where you're not isolating because you're vaccinated. In many states, there are mask mandates, but those mask mandates, for example, are only true if you're not vaccinated. People that are vaccinated, when you start doing vaccine passports, right, and saying that vaccinated people can go to functions and unvaccinated people can't, right? When we're not drawing titers, we need to be drawing titers, right? That's the real thing here is if we were really worried about what was going on, we'd be drawing titers, but we're not drawing titers. And the reason is because pharmaceutical companies want to make money off of these fucking vaccines instead of worrying about actual ability to spread the virus.
Hey, just to clarify, because I know you brought this up, I'm not sure if it's the exact same study. I think it is. The people who did that study about ADE and the Delta variant, again, it was all done with
Gotta
molecular
drink now,
modeling, right?
boys.
It was not actual cells. And these are the same people who wrote a previous preprint, which suggested that, again, via molecular modeling, no experimental data, they also suggested that azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine worked as an effective therapy, and that has not shown out at all. So
Hydroxychloroquine
again,
has
you
shown
can
out to
like
be an effective therapy.
we can
Yeah.
again we can like
As
we can
both of those have.
we can look at that And I'm not saying we should deny. I'm not saying we should deny it entirely, right? Because again, molecular modeling can be a useful tool. I just want to be very clear that this is all done without any experimental data.
And like
I don't even
like
normally
I said,
drink.
It suggests. I didn't say it said that. It
Sure.
was.
I'm just being clear that it's all
Suggests that
speculative,
partial
right?
ADE can be occurring in the Delta variant, right? And if that's again, what we know is that the variants are changing the phenotypical.
It is a
structure of the
snowball,
spike
yes.
protein. That is the number one thing you have to worry about with ADE.
I don't know if you can mix this with pregabalin.
Like when people are being vaccinated, right, with spike
Find
proteins
out.
from the alpha variant, right, and new variants come out with phenotypical changes in the spike proteins, that is textbook. Oh my God, we should be worried about ADE. Like it doesn't get, that is textbook. The reason you worry about ADE.
Listen, I'm gonna throw
phenotypical changes in the spike proteins.
The fact that there has been nothing to suggest that so far. If you actually can prove this, which right now I don't think you can, because if you were, you wouldn't be on a Twitch panel talking about. Okay, you'd be head of the world epidemiologist, right? Again, there's
Probably
no proof
not.
about this.
Really?
If you actually,
Probably
if
not.
you are willing,
Really?
are willing to say that strongly, that that's actually what's going on, and this isn't just fully speculation. Again, hey, maybe it could. Maybe there's a magical world where this
I'm not
could
saying
happen.
anything crazy.
I'm not.
I'm saying
No, you
regular-
absolutely. You're saying it's not crazy, right? It's
Your
just
interpretation of it
completely
is
false.
quite fanciful because
Yes.
it's based on a speculation. It's based on modeling. Whereas
I'm
what
talking about potentiality, and this is where we're getting at, right? Is because, and this is where we get into ethics, right? Because you guys are doing utilitarian calculus about the vaccine and about mandates. You guys are saying that it is okay to infringe upon people's liberties because you believe that the causal act, the consequences of those infringements will lead to the most happiness and the most human flourishment of the people in those countries. Right.
Life.
And
I
I'm not
wouldn't say
saying
happiness. For the record, I'm not here for happiness. I'm here for life. I'm the pro.
okay, so consequential and not utilitarian. Same
In contrast
difference,
to everything
right?
else that I usually argue on the subject of life, I am for the purposes of this debate, I'm pro-life.
Okay,
I'm not pro-happiness.
You're being a consequentialist, right? And what I'm talking about is I'm attacking that consequential.
Dad does agree with
I'm
eat the
attacking
feet
that
though,
because you have to
so
engage with probability. When you say that it is okay to take away people's freedoms and liberties, you have to say that the science and that it is that the science suggests and that it is reasonable, and that more than reasonable, that it is a very low chance that the outcomes of this will actually be worse. And what I'm saying is that there is a ton of questions about this vaccine, and that there is a ton of things bad that could happen, and there are a ton of good things that could happen from what you're suggesting. But the problem is that
we know
you are
happen.
engaging in taking away people's freedom and liberty. And that's really the crux. And so that's why I'm injecting science and injecting probability and saying, look, there are bad things that could happen. And what could happen is that if you're engaging in a consequential ethics kind of version of taking away people's liberty for the benefit of these mandates, then you have to engage with that probability. That's the biggest chink in the armor of that ethical theory.
I completely agree. There again, we can engage with these probabilities. Right now, science seems to point that overwhelmingly unvaccinated people are responsible for most of the hospitalizations, deaths, and cases. And as we already talked about earlier, they're more likely to transmit the disease. Now, listen, I agree. Mandating a vaccine can
We didn't agree on
We didn't agree on that. We
Don't say
didn't agree
that.
on that on that one.
Okay, sorry if I said agree. I'm saying that all of science agrees. I'm sorry if you guys disagree with it.
No,
anyways,
I'm quoting science that doesn't agree.
sure,
Yes.
So all
yeah,
science
okay.
doesn't
Again,
agree.
you have to find me
I'm
anything
not
that
allowed
shows
to show
it's not.
bias, but I
we can
really
so, yeah,
want
so
to
we-
do
okay,
that,
okay,
so
I'm just gonna move
smile
on. If you guys disagree
instead.
with it, that's fine. So moving on. Yeah, you can consider that mandating a vaccine can be an infringement of someone's right, which, by the way, we don't actually have full vaccine mandates. However, I think that not getting vaccinated is an infringement on our right. We already do this. We restrict some people's rights because it puts others at danger. That's why you can't scream fire at a theater. That's why we don't allow drunk driving, because it puts others at risk. And right now, the unvaccinated population is absolutely doing that to the people who actually give a fuck about the rest of the people in society.
You guys
The
already
fire and
also
theater
realize
thing
that
is
there's
always
precedent
hilarious.
for this, right? This isn't some revolutionary law that would change, like infringe on liberty like nothing ever in the
There's
history
no
of
precedent
mankind.
for this.
There's absolutely precedent. There's over a
There's
century
no
of precedent.
There's
The only
not a-
reason
there's
that
Do
we're
you
no
not
want me-
fucking
precedent for
Do you want me
the
to
only
list
reason
it?
that we're
I
not
can
all
do
dying
that.
of
Which one?
smallpox today
Sure.
is because we had vaccine mandates for smallpox.
You had vaccine mandates for children going into public schools.
No,
Yeah,
1905,
vaccine
Jacobson
mandates.
versus Massachusetts. A Supreme Court ruled that Cambridge, the city of Cambridge in Massachusetts, had the power to mandate vaccine for smallpox. Again, this is
Did they
over
really?
100 years
fuck
ago.
Yeah, dude. I love being informed with new data. Can you post that? Do you have that posted or like pulled up? Because it looked like you looked at another screen.
Yeah, I mean, I have my notes
it's
on
like-
another
Well, I
screen.
can
I
just,
don't know.
I'll
you,
just
it's
write
like-
down the
I'm
Supreme
sorry,
Court
that's
case.
wrong.
That's a good one.
1905
what?
Jacobson versus 1905 Jacobson versus Massachusetts. And yes, I am looking at another screen that has my notes. I don't know if that's not allowed on this
From,
panel. or-
No,
Lucas.
you're good,
Lucas
you're
has
good.
been
No,
like
I'm just- it looked like you were looking at it, so I wanted to.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
so
no,
Lucas,
I
It
you
just
been
have
is
my
in
like
notes.
super.
fact allowed. I can give some context.
you.
Everyone is allowed notes.
No, no.
Okay?
Yeah, it's allowed.
No,
It's
I
allowed.
was-
we
I
just
just
ask.
wanted-
We just want to know.
I'm gonna ask
Yeah.
Lucas to come in because he's not had as much chance to talk. And then we'll see who wants to be in next.
Yeah. So I mean, I personally, I don't give a crap about precedent. I don't care just because the government did something bad before. It doesn't matter that they can do it again. I just don't give a crap about it. So the fact that you're bringing up Supreme Court or state.
To be
precedent,
clear, I brought it up because you
I-
said that there was no precedent like 2 minutes ago. Okay,
No,
just to be very clear.
First,
I know
never
you're
said
walking
that.
it back now and
Wait,
saying you don't
I
care,
never said
but
that.
I just want to point it out.
Wait, I never said that, and we only said there was no
I'll take that
precedent
out.
when you were saying that there was a precedent. So we never started that saying that. You said that, and we said we don't know of any precedent. And like I said, I don't care about it. And probably Scott doesn't care about it either. Like, we're anarchists. We don't give a shit about what the state did
I don't
before.
give a fuck, but I still want to know about it.
Okay. So what would your position be on vaccine mandates generally then? With that in mind?
I'm against it.
Never.
I'm against it.
I wouldn't.
Never.
Mute
I wouldn't
people for
force
no
any
reason, I
vaccine
like
mandate.
that.
None of them.
Okay.
I've had smallpox vaccine. And I've given tons of smallpox vaccines. Right. I've had more vaccines than anyone on this panel. Trust. Right.
I think your
I might be
your
able to compete
position-
with you.
Your
I
position
might be able to
here
compete
about
with
the
you.
speculation to do with what might happen if we rely on too much vaccines, what we might not know about vaccines, what you still want to see the results of studies that you want to see them kind of finalized, and you want to go from modeling to actual laboratory experiments proven and that kind of thing. I think all of that would be a lot more valid back when we were talking about smallpox and the first vaccine mandates that came into play, because back then, fucking hell, you better be worried about vaccines, right? Shitty doctors. It was very easy to become a doctor. You had so much contamination from vaccinations. You better fucking be worried about vaccines, right?
Well,
Back in the
smallpox
18th
is a bad
century.
example because smallpox is a live attenuated virus with a bifurcated needle in your arm, but maybe a different one. You might want to use a different example.
But you're overcomplicating it, right? I'm talking about the position of should you mandate for people to get vaccinated against something that otherwise will cause a hell of a lot of unpreventable deaths. So that's why I use smallpox as an example. Is because smallpox, well, I mean, it is a good example because it killed millions of people, and it would have killed a whole lot more had we not mandated for the vaccine. But back to the kind of original point I was starting down there. This whole idea of
you're engaging.
I'm not calling.
That's that you can't say that.
Well, no, I can't say that. But what I can say that if you looked at the data, it would have been, again, I guess an act of God if there was a sharp reduction in the number of smallpox deaths, because every single scientific study that has gone into smallpox since, the number one factor for eliminating it from society is our widespread vaccines.
Right.
So,
no, but you're engaging in a fantasy narrative, right? Of where the government mandates it or it doesn't happen, right? That's not how freedom works, right? So the government can not mandate something, and still a large number of people can get vaccinated.
And it's
People
also
can choose
possible
to get vaccinated. Businesses could choose it. Institutions could choose it. The difference is whether or not you have a choice, right? This is why you see what I'm saying.
And there's also another possibility that you guys are not even taking into account is the fact that government mandates might make it more likely for people to say, no, fuck the government, I'm not getting the vaccine now. This is also a possibility, especially within America where there is such a high anti-government sentiment within the people.
Sure. So we can look exactly at the data. So overwhelmingly, people have complied with. I'll take Biden's vaccine mandate. Overwhelmingly, people have complied. I think it's up to like 96% of workers now, and the people who have. It's like a really, really high number. Or I don't know if that's that might not be workers. That might be companies. Sorry, I
It's
might be
federal.
missing that.
Yeah, I mean,
96
are you,
federal employees.
And then also
So,
about
which
the
is a really
point.
nice way of saying 4% of all federal employees got
No,
fired
it's a really
because they
nice
wanted to
way.
have
It's a
Generous.
really
That
nice
was
way of
nice.
saying
Yeah.
that mandates work and they
That's
get more people
interesting.
vaccinated. So this imaginary hypothetical, it's been fucking proven.
Yeah,
All right, vaccines are working.
We know
okay,
that when the government
Or
uses
mandates.
violence against people, that they do things like obviously, or governments wouldn't
Yeah.
exist.
The government
And then
does
just
We're
to
just saying
things.
that's
just to
immoral
talk
and
about
wrong.
Lucas's point about how American people are so willing to go and say like "fuck you." This did happen, right? We do
Yeah,
probably
you-
have some people who are doing
yeah,
that.
are you
However, it's
ignoring
I
like
think
all
the
the
numbers have
protests that
shown.
all the workers that have striked and all the people
Yeah,
that
yeah,
have
yeah. Okay.
protested? I mean, this is happening right now.
When it comes down to it, it actually has shown that less than 5% of workers have actually decided that, you know what, I'm not going to get vaccinated. I don't want to get tested. I'm quitting. It's less than 5%.
yeah, I
And if
mean,
they
most
want
people,
to,
yeah,
by all
most
means.
people,
I thought you were a dim sock, so you're okay with
Sock them. Different.
Oh, sock them.
We don't.
Okay.
I don't associate
Tomatoes,
myself with them.
tomatoes.
All right.
So I thought you were a socialist, man.
No, not quite.
You know, okay, all right. So you're actually okay with the government making, like, with people not having the ability to quit their job and being exploited by their capitalist overlords, and then the state coming in and forcing them to be injected with vaccines that they may or may not want, but they'll do it anyways because they
The
have to put food on
overlords
the
are
table.
taking
I,
over.
you know,
And
I
they could
thought
just
you were a
get
bleeding
tested.
heart liberal.
I
you know,
they
a
could just get
sock them,
tested,
but,
right?
like, I didn't know you were such a hardcore neoliberal capitalist. Like, come on over
Yeah.
to our side, buddy.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they can get tested, right? If they don't want to get the vaccine, they're not being forced.
Look, that's such an aside. Everyone knows that, like,
yeah,
getting tested weekly is going to be either financially really difficult for some people because conveniently that mandate from the government doesn't force companies to pay for it. And if companies did have to force to pay for it, they would just fire those people. They'd find reasons to fire them. And even still, companies are in the position where if you don't get your test every single week with the new infrastructure bill that was just signed in, it changed from $14,000 fine to a $70,000 fine. And if a company is doing it intentionally, it's a $700,000 fine. So it is
Right, so can you explain
$750,000 million if
Can
your
you
company
explain-
chooses to go against this mandate.
Can you explain to me why a company doesn't have the right to not hire workers who don't want to get vaccinated or don't want to get tested?
they absolutely have the right to
They
do that. We're
absolutely
talking
have
about them. We're talking about the mandates. We're not talking about
We're
the
talking
right
about
of
a
them.
monopoly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know. So if
Empowering
it's a federal mandate, why can't the companies just refuse to do that? Why can't they just not hire people who don't want to get vaccinated or tested?
but the company can do that. We're talking about your mandate. That's the
Right,
part
right.
that you're
right.
moving the goalposts into the companies. We're talking about the mandate.
I'm saying that if you are suggesting that companies are going to fire people who don't get vaccinated, why don't they have
Right.
that right?
They do have that right.
Dan looks pissed
Okay.
off.
I'm okay with
We
that.
agree.
We're okay with that. No,
Right,
we're
but the
not okay
problem
with.
is
We
that
don't
the
agree.
company is not making that decision, right? It's not one company that's making that decision. It's almost all of these companies are being coerced into making that decision. And if someone wants a meaningful job where they're not going to be forced to get vaccinated, they have to find a small business somewhere that's willing to hire them. Right? And the overwhelming majority of jobs are small businesses, right? But when it's only 100, right, depends on how you classify a small business. It can be very difficult for people to find work in that situation, but
Yeah.
not because a specific company is enforcing it, but because the state is enforcing it. I mean, like, look at truck drivers, for example. That is part of the problem that we're having with the supply chain, is that truck drivers are striking and quitting. It's one
Getting a
of many
vaccine is
changes.
not the only thing that's going to prevent you from having a job in a lot of situations, though. You guys realize
Oh, I
that,
said,
right?
yeah, of course. It's not a univariate analysis. I'm just talking about the
It's
specific
one of the
issue we're
variables.
talking about.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the difference between the government's mandating the vaccine for everybody and the companies mandating the vaccination for their employees, do you want to tell me what's the ideological break there?
Freedom of association.
Do
Exactly.
you want to go? Please explain that more.
You have the right to associate with whoever you want. Like, that means hiring or firing whoever you want.
Yeah.
That's not a right that governments have, or should have, in my opinion.
Right,
But the
I don't know.
maybe it would be better for you to ask, like, what's confusing you about freedom of
Yeah, like,
association.
I don't know. Yeah.
I guess what's confusing me is why you don't think that governments have the right to do that? Because they do. Legally.
Yeah, legally.
Yeah, I
but
don't- legally,
legality
well-
is not rights. Laws are just people with enough power to enforce.
So you're talking right. So you're talking from a philosophical perspective then when you talk about freedom.
We're talking
Just-
about
just to
ethics,
clarify.
so sure.
We're talking about, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We
So
believe
when
in
you talk,
freedom of association.
okay, I
Yeah.
just wanted to be clear. Thank you
Right.
for
We're not talking
clarifying.
about legal. You're talking to two
Yeah,
anarchists,
yeah,
right?
yeah. No, no, absolutely, absolutely. I just wanted to kind of push it clear into what we're talking about. We're not talking about legality at all. We're not talking about precedent, and that's fine. We can argue it from whatever way you want. I'm interested in the philosophical part of it as well. I'm interested in the idea of freedom versus liberty, right? Because liberty, which is a word that barely comes out of us Britbongers' mouth, to me, it doesn't mean fucking
Sounds-
a lot because, as I said, I'm pro-life. I'm not pro-liberty.
I'm pretty
I'm
sure you're not
pro-freedom.
pro-life. I'm pretty sure you're just using that word to try to give yourself a little bit of credit. Come on, stop
No,
it.
I'm using it
He already
because
said
I
it.
don't.
He's already
Yeah,
said
I
it,
know.
so
Come
yeah.
on, come on.
I care more about living than I do about the idea of masks on my face or vaccines in my arm, right?
Well, you know what? Free State Project is in Massachusetts, and their state motto is "Live free or die." So that might just be a philosophical difference between the two of us.
It doesn't have to be
You
a
know,
choice,
when
unfortunately.
we were ready to fight you, fucking Brits, what we said, right? Give me liberty or give me death.
I know.
That
It
is
was
the
a
American
stupid.
ideal. I'd rather have my freedom.
Unfortunately, I must say.
I heard we get 3 per debate. Okay, we get 3.
Okay. I
I
mean,
have an interesting question actually fielded from my chat. They wanted to say, let now reverse the opposite of what you guys were saying. Is it okay to fire people or only hire vaccinated people? And then they said, well, just do the opposite and you'll see the hole in your argument. And so I don't want to take credit for this. This came from my chat, but can a company hire people that are unvaccinated of over 100? Can
Yeah,
a large company hire people that are
they?
unvaccinated?
Why wouldn't
it'd
they?
be
Because they have
incredibly
to pay a
unwise.
$700,000 fine every week that they're intentionally not making that person get tested or vaccinated.
Sure, we have
They don't have that
syntaxes.
capability.
Do you disagree with syntaxes?
We
Yes,
disagree with
obviously.
all taxes.
Taxation is theft. I disagree
Oh,
with
okay.
taxes.
Yeah. So okay, I guess this will come down to like a fundamental thing where I think that there
Taxation
are
is
certain
theft,
rules in
guys.
society that you have to buy into to function. The government is responsible for
Thank God
So
I've got
hashtag
alcohol.
religion
basically
of
keeping those.
society is your answer to that. So
Is that your
No,
answer?
they don't have that freedom.
No, my hashtag is that to be in a society, there are certain rules that you have to follow. I think that your rights don't encroach on other people's. For the same reason why I don't think drunk driving should be legal, because you put others at risk. I don't think that going
Delicious
around
snowball.
unvaccinated to these things with zero consequences, no responsibility to get vaccinated or to do masks or to even get tested. I mean, that is just such a low level that we're asking people to do. I just don't think you should be allowed to operate in a society if you're refusing to do all of that.
And that's what I would agree with, and that's why I brought up the idea of freedom as well. Is because freedom to me is freedom from something. I know you don't like that argument.
Well,
but
yeah, because
to
it's
me,
just wrong. Like freedom
to
is
me-
capability.
Yeah.
freedom can be freedom from something as well. It can be freedom from harm.
No.
Pooples,
not
where have you
freedom.
It
been?
absolutely can be.
So would
And
you,
that's
would you
what we
let me ask
argue
you
about
something?
when we
Let me
bring up
ask
the
you something,
examples
then.
of other things that we prevent people from doing in society because
Okay.
they cause harm to others.
Would
That's
you-
the
would you
idea
con-
of being free from that harm.
I have a
If
question.
you're in
Would
a
you
situation in life in which you are in a job, right, because you need to get paid, because otherwise you'll be on the poverty line, because you'll become homeless. If you're in a situation where you're taking public transport because you need to get to
I'll
that
wait for you to
job, because
finish.
you'll be on the poverty line. If you
Okay,
don't have a choice in that
okay,
matter,
okay.
if you don't have a choice in that matter, you don't have a choice in that matter, right? And you are opposite somebody and you're surrounded by people that are unvaccinated that are going to infect you with COVID, that is not freedom. That
Would
is entrapment. That is imprisonment. That is
Okay,
a
I have a
direct
question
opposite
for
of
you.
any
Yeah,
definition of
I'm
freedom.
gonna let
I'll wait
Lucas
for
in to respond.
Please.
Yeah. Would you consider a slave to be more free if he has better food than another slave? Because I wouldn't. I would consider him still a slave.
Absolutely.
You would consider a slave that has a little bit
No,
more
I'm
food
agreeing
more
with
free
you.
than a
I'm
slave.
agreeing with you.
Can you explain the relevance of
Oh,
that?
okay.
I'm curious.
The relevance of that one is less free from starvation. That's the relevance of that. That's the play on words that you're using. You're talking about justifying forcing people to do stuff with the play on words on the word with the word freedom. That's why I'm pushing back on it, because you're
okay, to push back on that, when did I say starvation? I'm talking about death. I'm talking about if I
we're
need to go
talking
to a
about freedom
job,
from starvation. That's still the same way that you're using the word.
But I'm talking about death. If I need to go to a job,
You realize that we
to
could just
survive,
change it to death, right? Like,
if
Yeah.
I'm
it would
going
still be
to,
the same argument. So we could say,
if I need
would
to
you
go to a
consider
job
a
to
slave that
survive,
gets beat to death more?
I'm gonna give
or
Dan a
less free
chance
than a
to
slave?
respond to Lucas really quickly. Go on, Dan.
if I don't have the freedom to fucking live, and I need to go to a job to survive, and I'm unable to do that because I need to get infected by people that have refused to get a vaccine, I am not fucking free. I'm fucking dead.
Well, you understand that we can just change the hypothetical. Like, would you consider a slave that gets beaten to death more free than a slave that doesn't get beaten to death? They're both slaves. So does that make it better, since now we're making it about
One is
death, which
dead,
is what make the
to be fair.
semantical like little difference that you're trying to make this about? Would you consider
I would say it's quite a big difference.
Well, no, they're not free of the ability to walk. They're free. They're not free of death. You can be freedom. You can have
would you
freedom
consider
from death.
would you
can have
consider
freedom to live?
Yeah, would you consider a slave that gets beaten to death less free than a slave that doesn't get beaten to death?
Am I allowed to tap out and say that I feel like this is irrelevant and I don't know how you're going to bring
It's
it back?
not
Yeah,
irrelevant.
I'm sorry. Can you
It's
also
not
just draw the
irrelevant.
parallel to what this has to do with like your freedom?
I mean,
All we're saying
well,
is
he
you
doesn't
don't have a right to life. You don't
this
have a
is-
right to life.
If
What?
this is the
Right to
argument
not
that I
have
need to
your
take an
life
L on,
taken
then
away.
I'm happy to do it with this one. I really am.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Because
Can you
I
say
don't
that
know
again?
how
You
that
don't
can
have a
work with
right
this.
to life?
you don't have a
don't
right to
have
be
a
kept
right to
alive. You
life.
have a right to not be killed.
Exactly.
So you
You
have
don't
a
have
right.
the right to other people's labor. You don't have the right
You
to
don't have
the
the right to-
infringement of other people's rights.
Yeah, and
Why
I would
wouldn't-
argue that the people not getting vaccinated are infringing on other people's rights.
How?
No, you're infringing on their rights by forcing them to
Forcing
do
them
something
to
that
get the
they
vaccine.
don't want to do.
I don't want to get infected with COVID. I don't want that.
Yeah, but you want to force somebody your opinion on them because you feel like you're afraid, a little afraid of COVID. You want to force them. You want to put a gun to their head and you want to force them to do something they don't want to do. That's a violation of their rights.
I don't want to get hit by a car either. I like your
Well-
example. I don't want to get hit by a car either.
What does
On
that
a
have
late
to do
night.
with it?
What does that have
On
to
a
do
late,
with it?
on a late night when somebody's exercised their freedom to get drunk as a motherfucker, I don't want to get hit by that car. That it doesn't matter how free they
Yeah,
want
if
to
that
be.
person, if somebody hits you with a car, you should be able to put them in jail. Like, just
I think
Please would like to suggest some
fundamentally,
really
should you be able
hard
to put them in
topics
jail?
in
Because they're
chat.
just
Please
exercising their
do.
freedom to drive a car drunk, right?
yeah, but when they attack you, they're violating your freedom to not be attacked. That's
Yeah,
what
yeah.
it is. Freedom. Okay.
And I would argue, again, I agree with the car point. I think it's a fantastic one. Walking around
You're equating-
infecting
you're
other
equating-
people, walking
Thank
around
you,
infecting
guys.
other people
Appreciate
when
it.
it can be legally mandated for it not to happen is
But
the
that's not-
same.
There's the
That's
title.
Is the
That's
same.
not what we were saying.
That's not what we're talking. Now, if you were arguing for people need to quarantine when they know that they're infected with COVID, that's a totally separate argument. What you're saying is that people need to take what you believe to be a preventative measure, and that they
What I
need to
know,
inject things into
just to
their.
clarify, what I
What you
know to
believe.
be a preventative measure,
Yeah,
not what I
but-
believe.
Yeah, but
what
at the
has been
same time,
what
like
has
if
been scientifically shown to be a preventative measure against death, disease, and death.
and not necessarily shown to be a preventative measure
A
against
preventative
transmissibility.
measure against natural
Of course,
immunity,
with
a
peace and
preventative
love
measure against
always.
unvaccinated individuals, a preventative measure in every laboratory study. We have this is science. We know this. It's not speculation.
It's
We know
When you
that
just
it's a
say
preventative
things
measure.
without referencing anything, it's not just magically science, right?
How many studies
Like,
do you want on the effectiveness of vaccines against COVID versus natural immunity?
I've read almost all of them.
It's a preventative measure.
I mean, in my Discord alone, I have over 300 studies
Right. It's a preventative measure against infection.
against infection for you, right? There's no hard science to do anything more than suggest that the vaccinated population is actually stopping the spread of the virus. It's slowing the spread of the virus, which then
You really want
reduces
more
the numbers in the
you want more
hospitals,
Rittenhouse
right?
discourse. Are you
But it's not
insane?
stopping the spread of the virus.
It's lessening the spread because if you don't get sick from COVID, you're not spreading as much COVID as people
Okay,
that aren't.
Yeah, but you're still
Yeah, but you're just lessening. You're just slowing down the rate of infection.
Yeah,
You're not
that's
stopping.
what it's about.
in the spread. You're not stopping the
But
spread.
you're not stopping people from getting infected. If
No,
the
you're
entire
slowing the
population got the
spread.
Pfizer vaccine.
That's what a
100%
vaccine
of
does. It
people-
slows the spread.
Exactly.
Wait, no, sorry. I'm sorry. I
You're
want you to
still
walk
gonna
down
get
this trap.
infected.
No.
You're still
Go
gonna get infected.
down this
Vaccine for
trap.
it to be-
100% of people get the vaccine. What happens?
What's
I
your-
really,
so
I
what's
want.
the
I'm
Still
problem?
curious.
gonna get infected.
You're still going to have variants, and you're still going to have breakthrough infections, and you're still going to have people
Yes,
getting sick
but
with
not
COVID.
even remotely at the level of an unvaccinated population. That's exactly why we're
They're
advocating
still
for
No, no,
getting
no,
people
having tons of
vaccinated.
problems
Yeah.
in Israel, and they have like a
Tons
94%
is doing a
fucking vaccination rate.
Tons is doing a lot of heavy
You're
lifting
not
there. Okay,
100% is not gonna give you a
I'm
overwhelmingly,
gonna give
overwhelmingly,
time
stats are
out.
showing.
I'm gonna give Double Shine a chance to respond, and then we're gonna move into the last 15 minutes, and after which I'm gonna give each person 2 minutes for outros. So Double Shine if you want to respond, and then we'll go back over to Fabian.
Yeah, sure. So again, overwhelmingly, it's showing every single stat shows that an unvaccinated population is going to get. It's just.
15 minutes left.
It's not only is it going to, like, when you say slow, yeah, nobody is saying it's going to magically stop at each person, right? But you're not going to see the same level of infections, and you're not going to see the same level of severity, right? So when we talk about slow, one of the most important things about that is we want to make sure that hospitals
Oh my
have the
God, that
capacity to actually
question.
take over, or to actually take these people, right? If we just infect everyone and we overload the hospitals, you're going to see insane problems with a medical system that's just not able to treat everyone. That's just as much of a problem. And like, again, you can bring up Israel as one example, but around the
was
world,
gonna
we're
say
seeing
who
that
is Scott,
unvaccinated
but then I realized you're
populations
talking about
are
Fabian.
spreading it more and have more severity.
Okay, so a couple of things here. The reason we're bringing up slow is because you're going to get this virus. Because let's just be honest, it's not a pandemic anymore, it's endemic, right? It's endemic to the
It's gonna
population.
stay around.
Right, which is, I know pandemic is like a scary word and endemic isn't, right? But that's just what it means, right? Like COVID's here to stay. I mean, can we agree on that, guys?
No, absolutely not. That's just
So you think we're going to get rid of COVID? I mean,
It's going to become an
barring our
endemic.
ability-
It's more likely to become an endemic than it is for us to get to zero COVID.
right.
Okay, yeah, I can
engaging in
agree with that.
probability, right? Like we're almost certainly at a point where it's going to be endemic. We see that there's no statistical significant difference in the viral load in the upper respiratory tract, and so breakthrough infections are almost just as likely.
Seems
to
very specific
create
to
new
give that
variants as
stat. It's
unvaccinated
sus.
people. There is a slightly higher risk of individuals that are unvaccinated that get their infection of creating new variants, right? But of course, when variants occur in an unvaccinated population, they tend to become less deadly and more transmissible. When you have that's just basic. That's virology.
Did you say unvaccinated or vaccinated there?
Unvaccinated?
Oh.
I mean, this is what happened with the Spanish flu. This is what happens with most viruses, right? The natural progression of viruses is to become less deadly and to become more transmissible, right? In an unvaccinated population. That's just what happens.
Is that a point in your favor? I don't understand how that's a point in
That
your favor.
viruses become less
viruses
likely to
become
be
less
more.
deadly when they create
Yeah.
new variants. That the problem with that is when you have
They also become more
wait.
transmissible. Let's just be clear there, which is probably the biggest issue with coronavirus.
I feel like Roe v.
Not
Wade
after
is
people
gonna
have
be-
acquired immunity. Like if people already have
It's
acquired
gonna be
immunity,
very
the spread of the
spicy.
virus
This
is
is what
not.
And
happened,
that's gonna
this is
get
what
me
happened with
pissed
Spanish
off, so I
flu,
can't
Why
really
did the
do
Spanish
that.
flu go? It wasn't because we had a vaccine, right? It was because a new variant formed, right? This variant was more transmissible and less deadly. As it spread across the country and went to new areas, people were inoculated with acquired immunity from this variant. And so when the original, well, maybe not the original because the alpha variant likely developed in China and they think it might have been a new variant in Spain, but that's neither here nor there.
We're still
The
open to
one that
wild card
originally hit shores in
suggestions,
America,
so
right, that
anyone
came from
who has
Canada,
a random
that variant
thought,
was
put it
more
in
deadly,
chat.
right? And so that was decimating people with the Spanish flu. And then the Spanish flu almost kind of went away because people got herd immunity from acquired immunity from a variant that was less deadly and more transmissible. Now,
20
when you have a
million dead,
vaccine,
obviously.
what's that?
And the 20 million dead.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, like I'm not saying
Most
the
people-
fucking Spanish
yeah,
flu wasn't a tragedy.
No,
right?
no, it was eradicated by people either catching it or dying.
Yes, but
Yeah.
catching a variant, but what really killed it was catching a variant that was less deadly and more transmissible. The same would be likely to occur in almost any virus. This is what typically happens in the life cycle of viruses. The problem
best
is when you
egg.
have massive
Egg
breakthrough
timers,
infections, because you
mate,
don't
that's
have a
what.
sterilizing vaccine that reduces symptomology. The likelihood in a very highly vaccinated population is that the variants that are likely to survive are going to be ones that are more deadly to unvaccinated people, to people who can't get vaccinated. But there's a ton of
I just want to
problems here.
Just a couple of points there. It doesn't reduce you're suggesting, I think, just to be clear, that the vaccine doesn't reduce symptomatic instances of the virus?
No, I'm saying the vaccine does, and because it does, that tends to enhance the fatality of viruses. When you have breakthrough infections in vaccines that reduce symptomology but don't stop breakthrough infection. Yeah, it's a pattern.
So
Again, we're engaging in probability.
Okay, so that hasn't been shown. Obviously, what has been shown is that there are less instances of people actually contracting the virus
Yes.
and actually developing symptomatic cases of the virus,
Yes.
right? So we
Yes.
do know that it lessens transmissibility, and you imagine.
Well, we don't
and
know
several
that it
people
lessens
and some.
transmissibility.
No.
Again,
We
I'm not
don't.
gonna
We
agree.
don't.
He just walked you right through it.
We don't know that.
How can it not
After you
okay,
get
right.
COVID, we don't know whether
Transmissibility
you.
is about you catching COVID, not
Is
about
this
the
okay?
transmission of the virus in the population.
Okay, if you, I'll ask a question. If you don't agree with it, we can just move on with it, right? Here's my proposal. If a given population is less likely to contract a disease and become symptomatic and coughing and sneezing of a flu, right? Of a coronavirus, what have you. That means that population is transmitting the virus less.
No.
Do you agree with that statement or no?
No.
That's not how science
That's not how it works.
Okay.
Can you? What do you mean by that's not how science works? It's like absolutely how it works.
You're trying to assume. You're trying to assume that
you know how COVID spreads.
Okay, you're gonna.
I do. Like you're. So here's the problem.
You're trying to assume
We've already
that people are
explained
both
this to
going
you,
to stay.
and you're just
Yeah.
ignoring it.
But the assumption. So you don't agree with my assumption? I said it was.
Well, your assumption. You also make the assumption that people are going to stay at home at the same rate, whether they have symptoms or not. That's one assumption that you're sneaking in, and that's the part we're not going to agree with. If
I didn't say anything about that.
Well, you're assuming that.
You're assuming that. Would it help if I said all?
You're sneaking it in. You're assuming that, and you're sneaking it in.
Would it help if I said all things considered? All things considered, does that help?
All things being equal, you are correct.
Yeah. So let's say,
but all things are not equal.
All things are not equal. People
Right.
behave.
Are you advocating for social distancing on top of vaccines? I don't think we disagree.
Okay.
What? What does that have to do? Yeah.
Are you just throwing in random stuff to pivot away from the
Okay, so all things.
Wait, no, did I completely miss that, or like what assumption is being made there? I must have missed it then. I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to assume that like people who are vaccinated are going to act differently.
Right.
Yes.
If you are symptomatic, you're going to have different behavior than people that are asymptomatic. Like that.
Do you disagree with that?
Right.
No, I don't disagree with that. No.
Okay,
Right.
that's the point that we're making. That you're sneaking in that the idea that they're going to act the same way when they're not going to act the same way. People that are asymptomatic are more likely to walk outside, go outside, take less preventative measures, even when they have COVID, because they're asymptomatic, than somebody with symptoms. Okay, somebody that's sick, somebody that's feeling bad, that person is way more likely to stay at home than somebody that's not feeling bad at all. Do you disagree with that?
I don't disagree with it, but I wasn't talking about asymptomatic people.
Well, you're more likely to be
people.
You're more likely to be asymptomatic if you have the vaccine. Do you disagree with that?
No, you're not more likely to be asymptomatic if you have the vaccine because you're less likely to contract the virus.
Science. No.
That's just the science.
The way the vaccine
you're less likely to contract the virus, so it's not a
reduces...
question of asymptomatic or not if you don't contract the virus. Do you understand that?
We do understand that, right? But what we're saying is that in a breakthrough infection, there's no statistically significant difference in the upper viral tract, right? I mean, in the upper respiratory tract. However, there is a significant difference in the lower respiratory tract, the lungs. Okay.
Yeah.
This is why people with breakthrough infections can the air that they're breathing has just as much of the virus as someone that is infected but is unvaccinated. But they are way more likely to not know they're sick. They're way more likely to be asymptomatic. The vaccinated population is far more likely when they get sick for it to develop a high viral load in the chest and for them to get sick, for them to possibly be hospitalized, or for them to even die. Right? This is the difference. So if you're infected and you're vaccinated, you're far more likely to be out walking around and spreading the virus. If you are
infected. You're much more likely to not be infected.
It's about 40%.
Depends on what you mean by much more, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're not infected, It's almost it's the prequel to this argument almost.
But but okay. That 40% doesn't mean that 40% of the population gets vaccinated. They're not going to get the virus. It just means they're just going to slow it down. Everybody's going to get COVID.
It means less. It means significantly less of them are going to get the virus.
No, everybody's going to get COVID. It's just endemic. That's literally what's going to happen. Everybody's going to get it. The 40%. Yeah. Well,
what we're saying is, we'll break it down real simple for you, right? What we're saying is if everybody, the more
Thank you,
people
by the way.
that,
Thanks for
the
doing
more
me
people.
that favor.
Sorry, that was a dick move. I didn't mean to be it like that. But I'm just, maybe I'll simplify it for my chat. How about that? That makes it sound better. Sorry, that was a bit of a dick move. I don't mean to talk down to you. What I'm saying is, if you are vaccinated, like for the more vaccinated people there are in the population, right? The less likely all of those people within the population are to catch COVID per one contact, right? So if they have one contact with COVID and an unvaccinated person has one contact with COVID, right? The unvaccinated person, if it's, let's say, month 3 or 4 after their initial booster or whichever booster they have, right? Then the unvaccinated person is twice as likely to catch the virus. And the vaccinated person is half as likely to catch the virus, right? And this is with Pfizer. With AstraZeneca, it's like,
thank you, bro. I appreciate
literally
it.
33%, right? Medigen seems to probably be the best, but I can't get my hands on a fucking Taiwanese vaccine. But we'll go with Pfizer. We'll go with what is the gold standard that most people have, right? So the problem here is that you might come in contact with multiple times, right? And so what we know is that if we have a population of 1,000, or say 2,000, and 1,000 are vaccinated and 1,000 are unvaccinated, and everybody gets in contact with one cough of coronavirus, right? And let's say it's a 10% chance you get sick unvaccinated. That means 100 unvaccinated people are going to get sick and 50 vaccinated people are going to get sick, right? Now we have 150 sick people. Out of those 150 sick people, it is way more likely that the 100 unvaccinated people stay home, quarantine, and stay the fuck away from people. And it is way more likely that those 50 vaccinated people keep going to the grocery store, keep going to the movies, get on planes, go to new fucking countries, and do all kinds of shit, while they are just as likely to spread the virus from day 2 to day 5. From day 5 to day 7, and in some studies, day 9 and day 10, the unvaccinated people can still spread the virus. So the problem is that it is very difficult for us to parse out what is better in terms of transmissibility. Is the mass vaccination of people better? And that is what most of the scientists agree with, right? I will give you that point. Most scientists are saying, we believe that is the best thing to do that. But there is plenty of data to suggest that it could also be that people that get acquired immunity, right, and do not get vaccinated are actually less likely to spread the virus around.
Yeah, okay. I will concede the point that it's not.
2 minutes. I felt like 2 minutes until we go over closing. Bloody hell, closing statements. There we go.
Okay. So you've explained why the assumption, I suppose, that all things being equal isn't helpful, because nothing's ever equal.
Exactly.
I'm interested to see
people
whether
behave differently.
Yeah,
right.
I'm interested to see. Do we know that people that are symptomatic are more likely to stay home? Because from what I could see with what, and okay, maybe I feel like we're all in the realm of anecdote. And if we're in the realm of anecdote, what I would say is that what I saw in England during the lockdown is that people who can't afford not to go to work, regardless of whether they're symptomatic or not, and this is something that we've seen before the pandemic, because we don't have a culture.
We're in the realm of statistics.
We don't have a culture that has people staying home when they have a cold or a sniffle, do we?
Well, right now we do.
A cold or a sniffle, but not when people are freaking out about a pandemic and they have a flu and nausea and all kinds of fucked up shit to the point where they
you'll get sent home. Yeah, you'll get sent home. You'll get sent home. Yeah, you'll get sent home.
Do we have the date? Do we have the dates on that?
Like part of the measurements of most
people are more likely to stay home.
I mean, so this has an there's a study.
I'll tell you what, if I need my job, then I'm fucking going to work.
In the UK,
rain or shine.
In the UK, we've found that people 30 and up are more likely to transmit the virus, right?
Okay,
the
so
NHS
how is that relevant?
Because it's speaking to, you said we're in the realm of anecdote, and I'm saying no, we're in the realm of statistics.
Like, what is that also relative to? They're more likely. What is that relative to?
to the
Than people who are
unvaccinated
younger?
population.
Oh, to unvaccinated. Okay.
Right. So they break down each
I can
age
look at
category, vaccinated and unvaccinated. Now, one thing I do want to point out that if you see like Twitter threads of the study, you don't actually read the study, is that the unvaccinated population is more conservative, and more conservative people tend to live in more rural areas, and so that could have an effect on the data because you're obviously less likely to transmit or get infected
If you're in a rural area.
if you're in a rural
you
area
live
because
in
you
a
have less
field.
contact with people. So I do want to point that out, but we do know that the vaccine is so fucking ineffective that like from ages 30 and up, it seems to barely be having a statistically significant difference in the UK.
I just want to point out for the record as well that we are only talking about, I think, our countries, but as soon as you move that needle to countries that are less developed and less economically prosperous, this age thing that we all stick to about, oh, it only affects older people, that quickly becomes nothing.
Actually, Africa has some of the best number.
Okay, we're going to be wrapping
has
up.
some of the best effect, and they only have a 6% vaccination rate.
Okay,
When you look at generally less developed countries, that age bracket, that does not become a rule.
Okay, we're going to
So-
end that here, and this here, and this here. Okay, we're going to go to closing statements. And then I've got a great wildcard topic that everybody's going to love. And we're all going to come together with peace and love like Ringo Starr, okay? So if we want to start with closing statements, there'll be 2 minutes each. We'll start with Double Shine.
Sure. So I think if we look at the statistics, overwhelmingly it shows that people who are unvaccinated have a much higher rate of hospitalization, general cases, as well as deaths. I think that is the biggest problem right now that is facing the global population as a whole. And I absolutely think that the government not only it's not only their job, it's their responsibility to represent their constituents and enact policy that
I've
would
decided
stop
we're
the
all
spread
going to do a
of vaccines. I
stupid
think
topic
that
because Dan
a
looks
big
stressed
disagreement that
out
we
and
had here
I
was
feel bad now.
what taking away someone's liberty is. And while I think the anarchists here disagree that government can force you to do something, I don't know if they think they can force you to do anything. I fundamentally think that your the ability of the government to protect people's liberty extends to also making sure that a society is functioning. As a final quote here, I just want to quote the 1905 Supreme Court case that talked about this. In every well-ordered society charged with the duty of conserving the safety of its members, the rights of the individual in respect of his liberty may at times, under the pressure of great dangers, be subjected to such restraint, to be enforced by reasonable regulations as the safety of the general public may demand. Real liberty for all could not exist under the operation of a principle which recognizes the right of each individual person to use his own liberty, whether in respect of his person or his property, regardless of the injury that may be done to others. Thank you.
Okay, if we want to go over to Fabian.
Yeah, so beautiful. I love the canned response that he had typed out, man. It's amazing. It's
a quote.
Well done. Well, the entirety of the thing was well written. Oh, so the entire thing was a quote?
No, I
Right,
most of that was on the fly.
so-
That was not written out.
Right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Love it. So anyways, I just want to say, number one, that freedom and liberty is not positive and negative rights is a bullshit concept. Liberty is your right to capabilities. And the fact of the matter is that the data, I think, and the science, I think, clearly shows that there are a lot of probability errors that could occur in this consequentialist view that we have taken to whether or not we should lock down.
Laura,
you can look at countries
run
like
before you
Sweden.
can-
You can look at countries
while you
like
still
Japan,
can.
right? You can look at places in Africa, whether or not you trust that data, I understand. But the fact of the matter is that lockdowns, travel restrictions have not been shown to be effective at actually stopping COVID in any capacity. And they haven't even been shown to be effective of slowing the spread, because we know that acquired immunity in our younger population that is healthy is far superior to vaccination. And that the vaccines have a lot of They're not as efficacious as people claim, to the point where we had to change the definition of a vaccine just to get these things out. And the entire idea that we can lock down things without having negative externalities is absurd. We know that we're going to have dangerous things occur in our economy. We know that people are going to develop depression, alcoholism, that spousal abuse goes up, suicide goes up, and all these other things due to the downward pressure on the middle class and the poor.
20
and
seconds.
This entire idea of lockdowns and mandates is literally just the government and large corporations working together to make tons of money and maintain their power over the poor and the middle class. Thank you.
Oh, and Lunav came through with that one. Jesus. Okay, over to Dan.
We live in a really fucking interesting world at the moment. We live in a world where people are becoming far, far more interested in speculative information and fear-mongering than they are becoming in history and experts.
Please don't eat my sandwich, Luna.
Why this is dangerous is because we all have our echo chambers. We all have more access to information than we've ever had before. And when that becomes speculative and less based on science and more based on predictions and fantasy, the fact is we lose track of what we actually know. So just to kind of stop the artful part of that, I'll go to what we know. We know that masks make a difference. We know that the US states that impose mask restrictions, mask mandates, had less incidences of COVID. We know that the vaccine is the best defense against COVID. And if you're interested in maths, if you're interested in data, and if you're interested in living longer, then you get the fucking vaccine.
Fuck off.
And it doesn't matter whether or not
Fuck
this is a legal requirement. You should be getting the vaccine in every instance you have if you're interested in living. So if you don't agree with my view, that's cool. Forget about my concept of freedom. Forget about my idea that, you know, freedom means the freedom to not die because you're stuck with somebody else that has the vaccine. Just get the vaccine if you want to live. Take that as fear-mongering as you want. You could put that on a poster. Do whatever you want with it. Make a meme out of it. Send it viral. Get the vaccine if you want to fucking live. That's me.
Okay, great. And over to Lucas.
Yeah. I'm not gonna say take the vaccine. I'll say talk to your doctor and have informed consent. Make sure that you look it up, and there's people that I probably shouldn't get the vaccine because of immunocompromising things, or the Scott is one of them, for example, actually. I think I made a good point when I was talking with both Dan and Double Shine, when they both conceded that you wouldn't consider a slave to be more or less free because he's given more food or because he's not beaten to death. They're both not free. They both don't have the liberty to act. They're both slaves. I think to do a little bit of quoting myself. I think I wanted to quote the economist and philosopher Frederick Bastiat. And I know both of them might not be socialists, but I'm pretty sure both Bastiat and I would consider you guys socialists. Socialism, like the ancient ideas from which it springs, confuses the distinction between government and society. As a result of this, every time we object to a thing being done by government, the socialists conclude that we object to this thing being done at all. We disapprove of state education, then the socialists say that we are opposed to any education. We object to a state religion, then the socialists say that we want no religion at all. We object to a state enforced equality, then the socialists say that we are against equality, and so on and so on. It's as if the socialists were to accuse of us not wanting persons to eat because we don't want the state to raise grain. That's Frederick Bastiat for you guys, and I would agree with him. We're not saying that people shouldn't get the vaccine. We're not saying that people shouldn't have informed consent. We're saying that people should have the freedom to do this, and if they choose to have the vaccine or not, that is up to them. That's liberty.
Okay, brilliant. In time as well.